This video is concerned with an introduction to operations management. It's one of a series of talks on this topic. So let's start by looking at operations, the operations management functions. And this is to do with the core activities of the business. In other words, the transformation of inputs into outputs. That's essentially the function of operations management. It's more precisely the efficient transformation of inputs into outputs. However, there are related areas that link to the operations function. And I suppose if we were to think long and hard about operations within a business, all the functions, the various functions of the business must be linked to the operations management function in one way or another. So industrial engineering and production, there may be a section dealing with engineering issues, looking at technical drawings or CAD systems on the computer, or looking at particular developments in production engineering. And that department, perhaps it's looking at innovating the processes or looking at the technologies that's used, that department would link with the more traditional operations management function. The more traditional function would be, as I said earlier, the efficient transformation of inputs into outputs. It's receiving the raw materials and the components and then manipulating them, altering them so that they become the products that are required by the customers. So there is a linkage between let's say the more generalized industrial engineering aspects of the business, which, as I said, may be related to looking at the efficiency of the machinery or purchasing new equipment and so on. So there is a linkage there. But there's also a linkage with maintenance. Maintenance engineering is important to the operations management team because it's maintenance who keeps the machines running. It keeps the production lines running. The operations management team may look at the configuration of the machines and how the machines are set out and the sequencing of the production from one machine to the next. But it's the maintenance people, the maintenance engineers, who keep the machines running, and that's an obvious linkage. There's also marketing and public relations. It's important that marketing, the marketing section, the marketing department, informs operations about orders that are about to come in, the size of the order and the type of product that's been required, and if there are any special products that are required as well. It's important that the marketing flag up what's going to happen, what's in the pipeline. It hasn't happened yet, the orders haven't been received yet, but marketing are sure that this is going to happen. Therefore, operations management will need to ensure there is sufficient raw materials and components and that all the machines are working smoothly and so on in preparation for the orders when they arrive. There's also a public relations aspect to operations management in that production itself should be efficient. In other words, it should not be wasteful. It should be green in the language of today. It should be environmentally responsible. It shouldn't pollute the environment or cause damage to the environment. And also the health and safety of the workers is very important, and it's the role of the operations management team to ensure that the operators, perhaps on the shop floor, are looked after. Their welfare is of paramount importance, and the management, the operations management team should be aware of issues that are affecting the workers and trying to ensure that the workplace is safe and clean, well ventilated, good light, and so on, so that the welfare of the workers is taken into account. I say personnel, well, the HR department. Clearly, the operations management team must link with the HR department when recruitment is on the cards, when new operators are required, or new staff to operate certain machines or to perform certain functions. Clearly, the operations management team will give the brief of what is the desired attributes, if you like, of the people to be recruited. It will give that brief to the HR department. So job specifications and the delivery of the requirements of the operations department, the delivery of that to the HR is of paramount importance to make sure that the right people are recruited. So there's an obvious link between operations and the HR department. And clearly also there's a link with accounting and information. The operations management team may be given a budget by senior management and told to produce within that budget, to make sure that the machines are looked after, and if there's any small investments or consumables required, they would come out of that budget. So there is an accounting element to it, and also information. Information flows back from the operations team right to senior management to inform them as to how production is going, what issues have arisen, what problems are arising, and what efficiencies are being proposed, and so on. So there's a flow of information throughout the system, from operations management right through to the various department heads and right up to senior management. Distribution and transportation must also, of course, be informed about what's happening on the operations side, because the final stage in operations will be the distribution, the packaging and transportation of the product to a warehouse or to retailers or wherever it's going. So it's important that the transportation manager is aware of what's coming through and can make provision for that, and have vehicles and have staff ready to package it efficiently and distribute it. And of course purchasing will link with operations as well, because purchasing is the department that will acquire the raw materials and the components, as well as the consumables that are required for operations to run smoothly. Consumables in the form of, let's say, oil for lubrication for the machinery, or clothes to make sure that the dirt and grime of production can be cleaned up. So it's from consumables right through to raw materials which will be held in the stores. So purchasing and operations link together. Operations will advise purchasing of its requirements, and purchasing will place contracts to get the products that operations require. So let's look at what's known as the systems, or the holistic approach. Look at the whole system, the whole production system. It deals with interrelations among subsystems. So it depends on how we define the bigger system. The system could be the company. So we have various departments which could be seen as subsystems, all feeding into the welfare, if you like, and the routines of the overall system. So the overall system could be seen as the company, and the subsystems departments. Equally, we could look at just the operations management function and say that is the system, that is the production system, and then there are subsystems within it which could be related to stores, it could be related to dispatch at the other end, it could be related to particular parts of the production system that specialize in certain operations. So we have this concept of the system and subsystems. Now, a systems approach is essential whenever something is being designed, redesigned, or implemented. It's important to take into account the impact on all parts of the system. So, when some change is proposed, a redesign of the product, or some new process, or some new machine has come into the operations part of the business, whatever's happened, there will be an impact on other departments. The marketing department would clearly be interested if the product was redesigned. It's essential that they should know and be involved right from the outset. It's important that the operations team know exactly what the proposed redesigns are, so that it can tool up for production of the new design. It can buy in the various parts that are required for the machinery, and it can change the stores as required by the new system, the new product, I should say. So this idea of a system, that when one part changes, it has knock-on effects to the other parts. The other parts are affected also. So system designers must take the following into account. They must take into account how customers will view a change. It's essential that the system designers, looking at the performance of the overall system, let's say the performance of the company, it's important that they take customers into account. And to that end, feedback from the marketing section, from the marketing department, is vital, because the marketing department will know what customers have in mind. They're the ones who deal with the customers. They're the ones who assess the customer needs. So it's important that any design issues or any changes to the organization, the impact on customers must be taken into account. Will the customers get better quality? Will they get a product that more suits their requirements? Will it be efficiently delivered? Will the lead time in delivery be reduced as a consequence of some efficiency? The system designers must also have instructions for using some new feature. If systems are going to be changed, or if products are going to be changed, it's important that relevant information is disseminated throughout the system. Now, it could be that the operations management team are the initiators of the change. In that case, they must write instructions as to what the changes are, give a rationale for the changes, explain why the changes are necessary, and the likely effects of the change in terms of efficiency, costs, and the impact on the business. So there should be some instructions helping users how to use the product, and there should be some instructions also, information, if you like, passed around the system about the product, about the redesign or whatever issues there are. And looking at the subsystems, looking at operations management as a subsystem and marketing as a subsystem and so on, looking at how one subsystem, in this case operations management, will affect the others, because they are linked. They're linked through the overall system, the overall company in the example we're using. The cost must also be taken into account. It's vital that any change should be accurately costed, and again that should be communicated to the other systems who will, or the other subsystems I should say, who will, the other departments who will factor that into their calculations if it's relevant. There should be adequate training schemes put up by the HR section to enable workers to efficiently work with any changes that are being proposed within a systems view of the business. So any change to structure, for example, may need retraining because personnel are now asked to do additional functions or modified functions. It could be that there is changes within one particular department or one particular part of the business, in which case very specialized training may be required. So it's important that the HR section are capable of delivering such training as is necessary. There should be production schedules that are logical, schedules that are sequential, that the various processes run from one to the next smoothly, and a clear picture is given to the operations management team about how the system will work. If it's a new product, let's say, then the configuration of the machinery or the configuration of the input requirements may be different, and a production schedule showing how this could be done would be helpful to the operations team. Of course, it's important to maintain quality right throughout the production process. But again, here we're dealing with this whole idea of the system. The system should have good quality, i.e., in the example we're using here, the company should have good quality. The way it deals with customers, the way it projects itself, it should be clear to every observer of the company that this company is intent upon building products of quality standard. And that should run all the way through. But in terms of the subsystem, if we look at the operations management as, if you like, a subsystem of that, then the operations management will want to ensure that there's good quality all the way through the production process, and that the operators, the machine operators and the people on the shop floor, they are vigilant in trying to spot problems with quality and making sure that quality runs right the way through the whole production process, right to the end. And if it's a new product and a new design, then of course the marketing personnel should be not only informed, but they should now be in a position to know what the features of the product, of the redesign is, what is its functionality, I should say, and what are its attributes, and be capable of advertising and promoting this new product in the market. The difference between the cost of inputs and the price of output is the value added, and that's really what the operations management team are trying to do. They're taking in inputs, which in many cases just raw materials, semi-finished goods, components, but these products in themselves are not very valuable. So what the operations management team is, what it does is it transforms the inputs into the outputs. It transforms them so that there is value added. The value of the raw materials, of the metal or the wood or the plastic or whatever it is, that is altered. It is now more valuable because now it represents, or it is, a product. It represents something that the customers want. The customers did not demand sheets of metal. They demanded some item, and that item was made from sheets of metal. It's the transformation is what adds value. And of course, the more efficient the production management team are, the more added value there is. The more efficient means lower costs. So we have inputs, the transformation, or the, if you like, the conversion process, and it converts into outputs. So this is what operations management do. They move inputs into outputs. And that transformation process is adding value, which is the core activity of the business. That's what the business is trying to do. Because it's the value added that will produce the profits that motivate the business and the reason why the business was probably set up in the first place. So the value added is between the inputs and the outputs, and it's the transformation process that adds the value. Of course, during the transformation process, there will be feedback on how the system is working, how the production system is working. Operators on the shop floor will be able to make comments about certain issues. The machine broke down once, or the tool was not appropriate, or whatever. So that feedback can go back into this transformation process, and operations management will be able to work on the feedback to further improve the efficiency of the system. And that feedback enables control. The feedback is looked at by operations management, who will try to control the system in a way that gets over any problems. So the feedback runs from output as well, that at the final stage customers can give their comments about the product, and that feedback may come back via the marketing department, and the feedback will go back into the control system, which will go back into looking at the inputs, which are transformed into outputs. So there's a loop here, if you like, a quality loop that the operations management must take on board. Now there are degrees of standardization. For example, a standardized output take advantage of standardized methods, so less skilled workers are required, and the material is also standard. So standardized output means that the raw materials will come in set batches, so the purchasing department in a sense have an easy time because the product is standard. The methods of production will be standard. Once the efficient method of production has been determined by operations management, that becomes the set way to do it. And because it's a routine task, less skilled workers may be required. Customized output is different, radically different from the standardized output. Each job is different, and the workers must be skilled. For example, having a haircut. The person who cuts hair is a skilled person. I assume not everyone can cut hair. The person who cuts hair has to be trained to do it properly. So they are skilled. It's customized. Each job is different. Each person having their haircut may want a different style of haircut and a lot of different requirements. Whereas the standardized output, all are the same. So it's also worth trying to distinguish manufacturing, or if you like, goods, from service operations. Production of goods, well, goods oriented. These are tangible products. These are products we can touch. These are physical products. It's the production of goods. For example, cars, clothing, and so on. Now, services, such as banking, insurance, tourism, travel, education. Services, these could be the government, regulatory bodies, wholesale and retail, financial services. We can't touch the service. It's intangible. It is a service. Someone is facilitating something. The government is passing laws and bringing order to society. The wholesaler is providing a service in uh, buying the output from the company and breaking the bulk into smaller portions which can then be sold on to the retailer. It's a service. The financial services, banking, insurance, and so on. There's nothing tangible. We can't touch it. So there are two types, and one of the big distinguishing feature of these two types is the tangibility, if you like, of the outputs. With goods, we can touch them. With services, we can't. So the differences. Well, first of all, customer contact. That's a big difference. With goods, we don't have sometimes contact with the customer, or a great deal of contact with the customer. People work in companies, they produce, let's say, physical goods. The goods are dispatched to the customer. There's no contact between the customers and the majority of the people within the business. There's no contact between the customers and the production, the operations management team. But with services, there's a lot of contact. The barber who cuts hair has contact with the customer. There's uniformity of input, the degree of uniformity of input. Well, with goods, it may be highly uniform. If it's producing a standardized product, then the inputs will be essentially all the same. Whereas with the service output, it may be tailored to the customer's requirements. There might be standard products within banks, for example, standard accounts, but there may also be some negotiation between the customer and the bank manager regarding credit facilities, for example. So there is a difference. The inputs are not the same. The labour content of jobs. Some production will take place using a lot of capital, a lot of machinery, a lot of automation, a lot of computers, a high degree of technology built into the output. Whereas with services, it tends to be one person dealing with another person. Now, I agree that when we go to the bank, we may go to an ATM and get our cash out from a machine. But in the event of something going wrong, let's say, or we've forgotten our PIN number or whatever, we may have to contact the bank. We're going to deal with a person. So labour content in services is much more than with products. There's also uniformity of output, and this issue of uniformity of output needs to be considered. Let's say the banks again. The output of the banks is the financial service that it gives to us. And to some degree that may vary, because some people may have mortgages with the bank or loans with the bank of one type or another. Some people may have investments with the bank. So there are differences that creep into services. With haircutting, one person may want one style of haircut and the next person will have a different style. And it's for the barber or the hairdresser or whoever to have the capacity to satisfy that requirement. So it's a different output. With goods, generally speaking, there will be batch production for many items and the items will be the same. So if we buy a new car, that new car essentially is the same as that model from that batch that's been sold somewhere else. The cars are the same. So with goods, the output tends to be similar, if not exactly the same. With services, there may be quite a degree of difference. Measurement of productivity is also an issue. There are different ways we can look at this. It's difficult to measure productivity within a company, because within say a manufacturing company, because workers work with machines. Now, if the output is increasing, is that because the workers are more efficient or the machines are more efficient? So simply because output has increased doesn't mean the workers are more efficient. It could be that the structure of the business has changed. The design of the business has changed so that output is increasing. But that's nothing to do with the productivity, the output per worker. With services, with a hairdresser, it's possible to argue that the more haircuts the hairdresser does in a day, the productivity could be measured in that way, the number of haircuts, and it is related to the skill and the efficiency of the hairdresser. Agreed that there are some elements of capital, some equipment will be used and premises will be used, but in terms of output, the output relies on the efficiency of the hairdresser. So there are issues about measuring productivity between the two types of operations. Production and delivery. Well, the production and delivery of products, let's say in manufacturing, is dealt with by logistics and by the production team. The operations management team will oversee the production of the item to ensure that it's good quality and safe and efficient and so on. And then it goes to the transport section, to the packaging section, where it's wrapped and then distributed. So there are quite standard ways of looking at production and delivery within manufacturing. But back to hairdressing as the example. Production and delivery is unique to the customer. The next customer might want a slight variation on the previous one in terms of style or requirements. So it tends to be more personal. So with services, the production and delivery is different. The delivery is to the person, to the customer directly, and it's almost unique to that customer. And the production is based on the requirements of the customer. Whereas in production, it may be that it's a fairly standardized product and it comes off in a batch and it goes to different parts of the business for delivery. So production and delivery might be the same thing in terms of hairdressing, but in terms of manufacturing, there are two functions: making the product and then sending it off to the dispatch to be delivered. Hairdressing, a single activity. Production and delivery is at the same time. Quality assurance. Well, with production, all sorts of techniques may be used to try and ensure quality. It may be that the operations management do some sort of statistical calculation to look at variances within the production batch. They take measurements, so quality assurance may be done in that way. Whereas with a service, there's almost instantaneous feedback. If the hairdresser, the example I've been using, if the hairdresser gets it wrong, there's immediate feedback from the customer. The production and the delivery, as I said in the previous number 6, they are simultaneous in the case of services. Well, with quality, if the production goes wrong, the delivery is bad, the the feedback is almost immediate, unless the customer is very passive. But with production, it may take time to observe that the quality is slightly out. Different people will be involved in it. It'll go through various subsections, or it'll go through various processes, coming from stores to manufacturing to packaging to delivery. There are different parts, and quality can be affected by any one of those. The amount of inventory makes a difference between goods and services. In industry, in manufacturing in particular, there are stores that hold items in stock, raw materials, semi-processed goods, components. So the stores will hold an amount of good. But with a service, the hairdresser doesn't have a stock of anything. He's got scissors and some equipment, admittedly, but it's not enough to hold it in the stores. And also, it's the service does not require stock. The service is person to person. So there is no inventory with services, but there is in the manufacturing of goods. Now this list we've got here, in a separate video we'll deal with this one again. We'll deal with this list and we'll deal with it in slightly more detail. But that's all I'm going to do in this session. In this last bit we've distinguished goods from services, different types of operations, and that's it. That's all we're going to deal with in this talk. So thank you for watching.